Guys, welcome to our next lesson in our topic 3, biodiversity and conservation. Today we're going to talk about the origins of biodiversity. And there's two different things that we're going to discuss. We're going to discuss the theory of evolution and the origins of biodiversity. And we're going to talk a little bit about mass extinction events and what that means for biodiversity on the planet. So get ready for a super uplifting lesson. Here we go. When you talk about biodiversity, you need to have a basic understanding of the theory of evolution. If you take IB biology, you go much more in depth about the theory of evolution. But for our purposes, we really only need to understand that, there are 5 sort of components to this theory. The first is that genetic variation, genetic diversity exists within a species. The second is that diversity is inherited from generation to generation. The third is that there is an inherent competition for resources, both within a species and between different species in the same environment. The fourth is the idea that in that competition, the organisms that are genetically best suited to be able to compete for resources are the ones that are going to survive. And the last is, since those traits are inherited, they are going to be passed on to the next generation through the process of descent with modification. So through generations and generations of a species' existence, it will modify itself genetically. And eventually that can lead to a process called speciation. And as ecologists studying biodiversity, speciation is mostly what we're interested in, the formation of new species, which evolution leads to over the process of long periods of time. There are a few things that can sort of hurry along speciation, and we're going to go over these on the next slide. The first is the idea of the existence of physical barriers, such as land surrounded by water, or mountain ranges popping up in the middle of terrestrial plates. So, for example, if you have a terrestrial landmass and a mountain range comes up in the middle of the landmass, you are going to see speciation to the specific environment that exists on either side of that landmass. So you might have one species that lived in this whole area, and when this mountain range comes up, over here, the species is going to develop a little bit differently than they develop over here. And over time, that will lead to the formation of 2 separate species, organisms that are no longer able to interbreed with each other. And that's one way that isolation can lead to speciation and greater biodiversity. Genetic information can also be passed around through land bridges. As the plates of the planet move around, they form land bridges that allow species to move from place to place. So a species can take genetic information and bring it to a different part of the land mass of the world, and then different genetic information and different species and different competition occurs in another area. Both of these ideas are driven by what is called continental drift, the movement of the plates that comprise the surface of our lithosphere. And you can see here a picture from 200 million years ago during the Triassic era. The land plates on the surface of the planet sat very differently than they do now. So organisms that existed in these similar land masses, as these land masses got pulled apart, the organisms moved to different sort of corners of the world environment and evolved differently, and that led to biodiversity. So let's talk a little bit now about mass extinction events and how that has driven changes in biodiversity. Because if we go back to this picture, you'll notice that the Triassic era, 200 million years ago, that was a long time, and there have been a significant number of mass extinction events since then that have driven the evolution of species on the planet. So when we talk about mass extinction, it's important to understand two things. It's important to understand what the background extinction rate is, which is 1 species per million species per year, and then what a mass extinction event is, and that's when the extinction rate is greater than a background rate. There have been 5 in the past. The first one that we know of occurred 440 million years ago. There was one 364 million years ago, 250 million years ago, 200 million years ago, and 65 million years ago. And we are currently in the 6th mass extinction, which we call the Holocene extinction because it is caused by human beings. All of these other mass extinction events were caused by natural disasters. The one that people know the most about in sort of popular culture is the KT extinction 65 million years ago. That was the meteor that came and killed off the large land-based dinosaur population. And that was caused by, first, this gigantic meteor that was big enough it caused what's now the Gulf of Mexico. That sort of set off a chain of volcanic eruptions and a big ash cloud, but it was natural causes. It was like a weather event that caused that mass extinction. And what we're seeing right now is not caused by the weather, it's caused by human beings. We can say that we are in a mass extinction event because as we are able to calculate the numbers, 25% of all plant and animal species on the planet have gone extinct in the last 35 years. So that is way above this background extinction rate of 1 species per million per year. And it's something that is significant because we actually have the power to do something about it. When we talk about extinction now, we often talk about human-caused extinction. And the IB likes you to have some examples of human-caused extinction. So the next thing we're going to do is go over this example of a human-caused extinction, which is the dodo bird. This is sort of a famous one that's easy to remember. So if you had to give a few points of description about the extinction of the dodo bird, you could say that it happened in the 1600s, and it was due to sailors going and exploring in new areas and bringing rats and other animals to island nations. Those animals found dodo bird eggs and ate them, and also competed with the birds for food, and they won in that competition. So the dodo bird was lost forever due to human causes. The humans were the ones that brought those other animals to the islands. Your homework for this lesson is, if you're following along in the reading, read pages 150 to 162 in the Oxford Press Environmental Systems and Societies, and then try to do these 2 practice questions. First, explain how plate activity, plate tectonics, has influenced evolution and biodiversity. And second, compare and contrast, and remember that means similarities and differences, a named past mass extinction event to the current mass extinction event. So give those questions a try. When you're ready, you can check your work in the review video, and I will see you there.